West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tonight, a question of priorities. It is directed at the lawmakers who seem to have forgotten or choose to ignore that not so long ago they were fleeing a violent mob bent on overturning the election and maybe hanging the vice president and House Speaker while they were at it. Tonight, House Republicans are once again fleeing their responsibility to get to the bottom of what happened that day. They are refusing to serve on Democratic-controlled select investigative committees. One big incentive not to serve, well, it's coming from their boss, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who, according to sources yesterday, threatened to strip any Republican member of their committee assignments if they served on the select committee. Today, he said he was not threatening anyone, but declined to name members to the committee. Only Liz Cheney chose to serve.
I think it's clear to all of the people on this committee that our oath to the Constitution, our duty, our dedication to the rule of law, and to the peaceful transfer of power has to come above any concern about partisanship or about politics.
She was one of just 2 Republicans to vote in favor of the Select Committee and one of just a few Republicans to support the bipartisan commission that died in the Senate. She was one of just a small number who voted to impeach the former president and was stripped of her leadership post basically because of it. So it's not only McCarthy's message yesterday that is dampening any GOP appetite for investigating the insurrection, it's become something of a habit, a priority worth enforcing and punishing dissenters for. On the other hand, a Republican congressman having ties with a white nationalist Holocaust denier, as Paul Gosar has with Nick Fuentes, no problem. He's still on both his committees. What about the Congressman Andrew Clyde, seen here barricading himself from the mob, by the way? Was he disciplined for later trying to say the insurrectionists behaved no worse than a tour group? Or more recently for refusing to shake a wounded officer's hand? Nope. He's still serving on the House Oversight and, get this, Homeland Security committees. What about Congressman Matt Gaetz? Has being investigated in connection with the alleged sex trafficking of a minor gotten him bounced from his positions? Don't be silly. He's still on the Judiciary Committee. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she of the conspiracy theories and Jewish space lasers. Now, she was stripped of committee assignments, but by Democrats, after Kevin McCarthy refused to take any action to hold her accountable. Because whether haters, crazies, and targets of federal sex crime investigations are offensive to him, disciplining them isn't a priority. Defending the former president is. Seems to be his first priority. Oh, and just as a cherry on top of this hypocrisy sundae, it's not like Kevin McCarthy hates all select committees either.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping.
With that, let's bring in California Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. He's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and a member now of this select committee that most Republicans want nothing to do with. Chairman, What do you think it says that Kevin McCarthy is willing to punish Republican lawmakers for serving on a select committee to investigate January 6th, but he won't strip people of committees for, anti-Semitism, Jewish space laser conspiracies, alliances with white supremacists? What does that say?
Well, that Kevin McCarthy has only one priority, and that is to do whatever Donald Trump tells him to do. Donald Trump doesn't want the events around January 6th investigated and didn't want the commission, so McCarthy opposed the commission, as did McConnell. And now the Select Committee is meeting the same opposition from McCarthy. But we're determined to do our job nonetheless and to develop a comprehensive objective report of what happened prior to the 6th, what happened on the 6th, why we were so ill-prepared, and most important, make recommendations about protecting our government and our capital and our people in the future. And we'll do that regardless of what Kevin McCarthy may do.
So what happens? Even if no other Republicans besides Liz Cheney join the committee, what happened then?
Well, we will go forward. The fact that they rejected a commission that was even 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, with combined subpoena power, that is, neither party could subpoena witnesses on their own. The fact that they would reject that demonstrates clearly they're just not willing to do their duty, and we can't force them to do their duty and uphold their oath. We can only uphold ours, but we're certainly not going to leave the events of January 6th uninvestigated in the country unprotected because they won't do their jobs.
On the subject of subpoena power, Congressman Benny Thompson, who will chair this select committee, has said he would, quote, not resist calling former President Trump to testify. Do you want to see the former president testify, subpoenaed as part of this probe?
We're, I think, postponing any of those kind of decisions until we're fully staffed up, and not just with our staff, but our members. And we have a chance to discuss the scope of the investigation and our priorities. There'll be plenty of time later to decide on which witnesses are most important and what evidence we need to gather. But at this point, we're still just getting squared away.
Kevin McCarthy, also a name. I think that some people are wondering whether or not he would be called to testify because of the phone call that he had with the president on January 6th. Of course, you're no stranger to people ignoring subpoenas or not responding to subpoenas. What happens then?
Well, we'll cross that bridge, I guess, when we get to it. There are mechanisms that we have to enforce our subpoenas, including holding people in contempt and going to court. But as we saw in the McGahn litigation, which took us a couple of years, that's not a very viable remedy. In fact, I have a bill, Protecting Our Democracy Act, which would accelerate court enforcement of congressional subpoenas so that we don't have anyone run out the clock on us like this again. Those reforms are going to be very important. But in the near term, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we get the evidence that we need to develop that report.
How important is it to you to find out exactly what was happening in the White House, ask people who were there, maybe subpoena them, to find out what the president was doing, what he was saying, what he was asking for during the insurrection?
Well, I think it's going to be very important that we get a full body of evidence and follow the facts wherever they lead. And I don't want to prejudge what direction that will take us. We really need to discuss that as a committee. But at the end of the day, there should be no sacred cows. We should investigate and find out all of the factors that went into that tragedy, why there wasn't a more robust response in protecting the Capitol, when it happened, what role anyone played in that, whether they're in the White House, in the Congress, in the police, you name it. So we want this to be comprehensive. We want it to be objective. We're going to do our best to do it in a nonpartisan way, and we'll just follow the evidence wherever it leads us.
It is Friday, the 2nd of July of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, I guess we need a few stiff ones now, don't we? Not just because we have Independence Day wrenched away from our grasp. darn it. And I'm not talking about the fires that are raging. I'm talking about the Supreme Court taking away, well, our voting rights. But what do you expect? This is one hell of a concerted Nazi effort to take over America, and they seem to be doing pretty good. I thought they already had the enabling acts, but it seems like they're getting more and more enabling acts. So there we go. You know what's bad when they want to arrest the League of Women Voters in Kansas for the great crime of, you know what? Registering people to vote. That's a crime now. Yeah, let the states do what they want to do. All right. Well, that's not the end of it either. It looks like more than a case of beer is involved. I laugh, but it's just because it's a gallows humor kind of laugh. Oh, my. Well, I keep saying we have our work cut out for us because I still have a positive attitude that we can get out of this calamity. Just, you got to keep putting one step in front of the other. Plan your moves, and we'll get out of this. And I don't care if they're saying it's illegal to register people to vote. Of course a Nazi would say that. But America is not a Nazi state, no matter what Steve Bannon says. It occurs to me, when I joke around about, the Nazi takeover of America, because I'm not really joking around, but when I joke around about it, I sometimes have to consider that what if a person like Bannon thinks the rest of us are just uncouth lessers, and there's no way the lessers should be allowed to govern the great. Taxes are for little people, and I guess voting is too. It used to be that, if we voted, it was pretty much to keep us happy because they were going to do what they were going to do anyway. But apparently, we found out that democracy is a pretty good thing. Representative democracy is great. Maybe we should go ahead and try it. And at least since 1965, and it was way before that, but at least since 1965, they with a capital THEY, have been working very hard to dismantle, what we used to call the Great Society. Because the Great Society somehow conferred greatness upon us, the people. Now, when the powerful hear that, they don't like it. Because in their furtive minds, and fetid minds. I'll get it out. It's Friday. I haven't been dipping into the French 77s, okay? It's just the morning. In their fetid minds, they think that they're going to lose something. And they can't lose even a tiny amount. It is just so obsessive of them. Wow, hoarding wealth. Gonna have every little bit. Every nook and cranny has to be filled. Well, I don't know. Why don't we just kind of like have a few blank surfaces here and there so that we can move about? Okay, well, we do have a curated show for you today. And we have them every day that we're on. But I just feel compelled to tell you that. And why don't we tell you what that is? Yeah, so much for the morning rant. Well, starting off in the Bistro Cafe at the top, Kevin McCarthy threatening his own members for sitting on the January 6th Select Committee is the cherry on top of this hypocrisy sundae. Well, of course. On the rest of the menu, a handful of states brace for the possibility that most of the country will lose access to abortion. They got a whole string of things they're going to overturn because we got a little too big for our britches. Republicans are mad. The latest infrastructure plan funds a tax cheat crackdown on the wealthy. They don't like that. After a surge of Native American votes helped Biden win in the Southwest, the Supreme Court ruling gutting the Voting Rights Act will severely hinder tribes' access to the ballot. A feature, not a bug. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the U.S. State Department added Turkey to its list of countries implicated in the use of child soldiers. And the UN Secretary General urged Myanmar's military to release Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi and President Myint right now. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is our chat room link, deftly located by superior graphic design. Thank you, Tom. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, though she be a very busy gal. And, you know, Netroots Nation is coming up in D.C. Just reminding folks that that's coming up. And, you know, we're not Netroots Radio for nothing. Okay. If you would also now look across the page to the left of our homepage, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, I hope that you will notice that Patreon link. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring patronage helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and resist this Nazi takeover of America. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we are able to stretch those dollars even on the quantum level because we leave no strange quark unstretched. And because of that quantum mechanical ability, we indeed pay our bills. We indeed fly under the radar, and we indeed continue fighting this Nazi takeover of America. And it's been going on for quite a while, and we have 10 years of experience of doing it. Okay, now we're going to get rid of the filibuster. Just you watch. So thank you for your generosity and helping us fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that also. Thank you, Tom. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, and I would suggest you do, and you can find me at Justice Putnam, of course. And the reason it's good to follow me there is because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted up on Twitter and everything else. I try. Sometimes I'm not able to get it out there because we're a little behind. But that's how it goes. Because when you have a snoozing sous chef, sometimes they get a little temperamental. And you know how hard it is to get good help now. Jeez. They want so much. I mean, minimum wage. Can you believe that? They want minimum wage. Wow, what a bunch of commies. Okay, well, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And, of course, most importantly, please get podcasts at Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, well, this first offering here... Oh, I haven't even opened it up. What's wrong with me? I usually have these tabs opened up. Okay, we'll just wait for it to load in, and then we'll tell you what's going on. Oh, how has your Friday been? Have they taken any more of our rights away? Because it's starting to piss me off. Oh, Lisa Needham out of the American Independent brings us this first offering. There is a very real chance that only a handful of states will fully support abortion rights in the near future. And those states will have to bear the burden for the rest of the country. Abortion restrictions are being proposed and enacted at a record-breaking pace all across the country, but particularly in red states. Additionally, the U.S. Supreme Court recently agreed to hear a dispute over Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban, a pre-viability ban that, if upheld, would alter the standards set by Roe v. Wade. Well, if they can do it with the Voting Rights Act, and even the Second Amendment, we'll just throw out the regulated militia part. Who cares about that? Do you think they're going to take on Roe v. Wade and try to weaken it as much as possible? Yes. And then what's after that? I keep telling you, it was birth control that they really hated back in the day, and abortion just got lumped up into that. They've been going after a woman's right to be able to regulate her births. And then they're going to make certain kinds of overt sexual type things. They're going to have to cloak our women. That's what we're getting to. Mark my word. Do we allow it to happen? No. As abortion rights advocacy group NARAL noted when the Supreme Court announced it was taking the case, there is no path for the Supreme Court to uphold Mississippi's abortion ban without overturning Roe's core holding. Mary Ziegler, author of Abortion and the Law in America, Roe v. Wade to the Present, stated that if a 15-week pre-viability ban, such as Mississippi's, is upheld, it is not clear whether the court will impose any limit on abortion bans. Taken together, these events signal that abortion access is in real peril. That peril, though, is not evenly distributed across the country because it's not even evenly distributed across economic spectrums. Women of means, especially white women, will continue to be able to get abortions. Safe, legal, and sane. And everybody else is going to be stuck with the back alley past and sepsis, which mostly results in death. And maybe that is the feature, not the bug that they are attempting to, get. Making abortion access difficult or even illegal does not stop people from needing abortions. It does make it more expensive and logistically challenging to obtain them, particularly when people need to travel out of state. Often abortion funds, groups that provide assistance, both financial and practical, to people seeking abortions can help. However, those groups are already overtaxed. In 2019, the National Network of Abortion Funds helped almost 63,000 people, but they had over 200,000 requests for help. And that need spiked even higher during the pandemic. The president of the National Abortion Federation, the Reverend Catherine Ragsdale, told NBC News that any Supreme Court decision that does not fully uphold Roe is going to result in more people having to travel farther and raise more resources, whether that's paying for procedures or travel costs or lost wages costs. If that happens, she said, people will become more dependent on the limited resources of abortion funds. Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. A provision in the bipartisan Senate infrastructure bill announced on June 24 would provide for investing more money in enforcement of laws targeting top earners who evade payment of taxes. And Republican senators are furious. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, the third-ranking member of the minority party leadership, told Axios that spending $40 billion to supersize the IRS is very concerning. Law-abiding Americans deserve better from their government than an army of bureaucrats snooping through their bank statements. Senator Marsha Blackburn warned of the huge potential for abuse. Bigger government results in more waste, fraud, and abuse. Throwing billions more taxpayers at the IRS will only hurt Americans struggling to recover after waves of devastating lockdown, said Texas Senator Ted Cruz, probably on his way to Cancun when he said it. Instead of increasing funding for the IRS, we should abolish the damn place. Well, of course, because he's probably not paying his taxes either. Even South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who backed the bipartisan framework, complained. There's some people on our side who don't like empowering the IRS. I don't mind empowering the IRS if it's a reasonable thing to do, but I mean, how much uncollected taxes can you gather with $40 billion? Well, I don't know. I would hope $160 billion or more. How about trillions? It would be a good investment, some would say. Earlier in the year, Biden introduced the American Jobs Plan, a $2.25 trillion transportation, climate, water, broadband, child care, and caregiving infrastructure package, and the American Families Plan, a $1.8 trillion package investment in paid leave, free preschool and community college, and affordable health care. He proposed funding the plans by raising tax rates on corporations and those earning $400,000 or more, and by spending $80 million more to enforce existing tax laws. Now, Republicans unanimously opposed the plans, drawing what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell called a red line against the tax increases for wealthy Americans or businesses because, as we know, like with voting, taxes are for little people. Fonseca of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The largest Native American reservation in the U.S. includes parts of 3 Arizona counties, all of which had different approaches to precinct voting in the 2020 general election. Voters in Apache County had to cast ballots at the polling location they were assigned. People registered in Navajo County could vote anywhere in the county. Coconino County used a hybrid model. The Navajo Nation has long argued the approach is inconsistent and confusing, leading to ballots being rejected and tribal members being denied the same opportunity to vote as others in Arizona. Well, Alito said it's just a small burden for you. The U.S. Supreme Court disagreed in a broader case over Arizona voting regulations, upholding a prohibition on counting ballots in the wrong precinct and returning early ballots for another person. The ruling will reach broadly into tribal communities, particularly those where indigenous people don't have residential mail service or must drive long distances to polling sites and the post office. Native American voting rights advocates viewed it as another notch in a long history of voting discrimination, but say they will continue pushing for access and changes in laws. The High Court's conservative majority wrote that Arizona's interest in the integrity of elections justified the measures and said voters faced only modest burdens at most. A lower court found them discriminatory under the Federal Voting Rights Act. But if you don't have a Voting Rights Act, you have to guess how many gumballs are in the jar. And you're going to have a knee to the throat while they're making you do it. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, not that long, but strange. If the movie Gaia had to be summed up in a word, it might be trippy, which is sort of appropriate given the central role of mushrooms in the proceedings. Way more than just trippy, though, Gaia is a cautionary tale about humanity's destructive influence on the world, noting, apocalyptically, that nature always wins. The convention here is that of a horror movie with plenty of thrills and chills throughout. Set in South Africa, the story starts with two forest rangers, Winston and Gabby, who are on assignment in a national park. After the pair become separated, Gabby stumbles upon a pair of resident survivalists, Berend and his son Stefan. Injured by a booby trap set up by the pair to dissuade intruders, Gabby has no option but to stay with them. As she recovers, it becomes clear that there's something else in the forest that's not exactly human or human anymore. The creature, best described as a human-shroom hybrid, seems connected to a mysterious fungus that's found in the forest and which affects everyone, including Gabby. As the layers are peeled back on Barron's former life, we find that he was formerly a chemical engineer, casting a looming doubt as to the natural or other origins of the fungus. Roughly based on the controversial Gaia theory of the 1970s, there's a creepy sexual subtext involving Barron's adolescent son and Gabby, as well as a biblical parallel to the Isaac and Jacob story in the final act. Beautifully shot and sound mixed, and with a strong performance from Carol Nell as Barron, Gaia is scary, thought-provoking, and stylish in a tight 96 minutes, and is even more notable as its director Jacko Bauer's first full-length feature. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we'll talk about clinics for long-haul COVID patients,
the rise of the Delta variant and what you can do about it,
and using barbershops to get vaccines to communities that need them most. Early in the pandemic, there were some reports of people with odd symptoms such as fatigue and memory issues that continued long after their acute infection. Now these long haulers are getting some specialized help.
More and more data is coming out about long COVID. That's serious physical and mental effects that can last half a year after people first get infected. The latest study came out last week in the journal Nature Medicine. Researchers looked at health records for a few hundred people in Bergen, Norway. That was almost everyone in the city diagnosed with COVID during several months in 2020. Overall, 61% of the group had symptoms 6 months after they were first infected. Their most common problem was fatigue, followed by difficulty concentrating, disturbed smell or taste, memory trouble, and a hard time breathing. Two striking things about these patients. One was that many had just a mild or moderate case of COVID at the start. The other was that a lot were young, age 16 to 30. Other studies have reported a similar symptom cluster, such as one by University of Washington researchers that found about 30% of people with COVID had these lingering troubles.
Do doctors know what's causing these problems?
That's still a mystery, Tanya. Some people have organ damage related to the virus infection, but some do not. Doctors are trying to figure out how best to treat them. SciAm contributor Melba Newsom wrote this week about new COVID recovery clinics that treat the whole patient, rather than making people run from a lung doctor to a neurologist to an immunologist. Patients say the coordinated care helps, and they feel more hopeful since they're being taken seriously and not dismissed as crank cases. The NIH is also taking it seriously, spending about $1 billion to study the disease. It now has an official jawbreaker of a name, post-acute sequelae of SARS-CoV-2 infection. Melba notes, however, there is a racial imbalance showing up at these clinics. Overwhelmingly, the people referred there are white, but people of color are more likely to get COVID. So access barriers, such as lack of health insurance, are likely keeping care away from many people who need it. It's yet another burden added to the health inequality that's already hurting people in the pandemic. Let's talk about the Delta variant. It's spread to more than 70 countries, and it's now the dominant variant in the U.S. How worried should we be?
The Delta variant is definitely concerning, particularly for unvaccinated people. It's already causing another surge in the UK, where it makes up the vast majority of cases. And a company that's been tracking virus sequences in the US estimates this variant now accounts for about 40% of cases here, making it more than twice as prevalent as the Alpha variant that was previously the most common. As you've noted before, Josh, research from the UK suggests Delta is at least 40% more transmissible than Alpha, and almost twice as likely to result in hospitalization. The data are a bit murky on whether it actually causes more severe disease or not, though. So far, it hasn't actually caused a huge uptick in hospitalizations or deaths in the UK. Still, it's spreading widely in the US, where only about half the population is fully vaccinated, far less in some areas. Experts say it's not likely to cause another devastating nationwide surge like the one we had last winter, but it will probably lead to flare-ups in some states where fewer people have been vaccinated, such as Alabama or Mississippi. And the risk could increase in places where hotter temperatures force more people to spend time in air-conditioned indoor settings where the coronavirus can easily spread.
This sounds pretty grim. What can we do about it?
The good news is that the vaccines work. More data from the UK show that 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine were 96% effective at preventing hospitalization, and 2 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine were 92% effective. But you need both shots. A single dose of AstraZeneca was only 71% effective at preventing hospitalization, and 1 dose of both vaccines was only around 34% effective at preventing infection. We don't know yet how well the Johnson & Johnson vaccine works against the Delta variant, but it's likely to provide some protection. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is urging even vaccinated people to keep wearing masks and practicing social distancing, just to be on the safe side, given how much virus is still circulating. The CDC has not changed its guidance, though. It still says vaccinated people don't need to mask up unless they want to. But with the Delta being so transmissible, it couldn't hurt to err on the side of caution. There are still plenty of people who are skeptical about getting vaccinated, sometimes for valid reasons. Now, some efforts are trying to build trust by reaching people in their neighborhoods.
The rate of COVID vaccinations among people of color lags behind that of white people. Access barriers are one reason for this, and so are negative experiences with a medical profession that breed distrust. Black-run barbershops and hair salons may be able to counter some of this, says Stephen Thomas, who directs the University of Maryland Center for Health Equity. For the last 15 years, Thomas has been researching the trust placed in barbers and stylists by their communities, and he says it's a powerful thing. He's been training these people to help educate their clients about ways to prevent diseases such as diabetes. Now this expertise is helping with COVID vaccines. Thomas's group is part of a White House Shots at the Shop campaign. Barbers and stylists are getting trained to talk to people about the benefits of vaccines versus the risks, building on long relationships. These conversations, which can happen while snipping and combing, are not lectures, and they're not magic, and they don't convince all doubters. But they do have an effect on many people. Some shops have become pop-up vaccination sites staffed by local health clinics, solving access problems by bringing free vaccines into the neighborhood. Thomas's project is called the Health Advocates in Reach and Research, and that abbreviates naturally to HARE.
Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out siam.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
One in 6 Americans get sick from eating contaminated food each year. Contamination caused by salmonella is especially common. It's sometimes found in poultry, eggs, ground beef, pork, and even peanut butter. To reduce your risk from this and other foodborne germs, remember to clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean your hands with soap and water. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from other foods. Wash counters, cutting boards, and utensils before and after using them. Cook all food thoroughly and use a food thermometer to make sure food is cooked. Promptly chill meat, poultry, eggs, and other perishables. Finally, don't prepare food for others if you're sick, and be extra careful when you prepare food for children, pregnant women, the elderly, or people in poor health. To learn more about making food safer to eat, visit www.cdc.gov/vital signs.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, outlawed slavery or involuntary servitude throughout the United States and its territories, thereby finishing the work begun by President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of 1862 to 63. The Emancipation Proclamation abolished slavery in the states that were members of the Confederacy, but not elsewhere. The 13th Amendment said nothing about citizenship and equal civil rights for the former slaves, especially their right to vote. These matters were later taken up by the 14th Amendment in 1868 and the 15th Amendment in 1870. The 14th Amendment granted full citizenship to African Americans. The 15th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote to men regardless of their race, color, or previous condition of servitude. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Ralph Waldo Emerson told of a dinner guest who went on and on about the virtue of honesty.
offering his own life as a model of perfect rectitude. The louder he talked of his honors, said Emerson, the faster we counted our spoons. That's my reaction to the cacophony of phony piety arising from Republican governors and legislators who are trying to enact more than 250 new state laws to stop Black, Latino, Asian American, Indigenous, and other non-Caucasian voters from casting ballots. Yet they proclaim, we're not racist, we're righteous crusaders protecting the sanctity of the vote. Really? So why are they specifically targeting people of color with their repressive voting restrictions? For example, panicky Republican lawmakers in Georgia tried to outlaw any early voting on Sundays. Odd. Why? It's a flagrantly racist attack on the black church. For years, a joyous civic tradition called Souls to the Polls has played out in Southern black churches on Sundays prior to Election Day. After the sermon and prayers, congregants, ministers, musicians, and others in the church family travel in a caravan to early voting locations to cast ballots. It turns voting into a civic, spiritual, and fun experience. What kind of shriveled soul tries to kill that? Apparently, the same shameful souls in the Georgia GOP who want to stop local groups from providing water and snacks to citizens forced to wait for hours in line to vote. They're actually trying to make it a crime to give water to thirsty voters. Hey, Republicans, what would Jesus do? This is Jim Hightower saying the goal and duty of every public official ought to be to maximize voter turnout. After all, the more Americans who vote, the stronger our democracy. But there's the ugly political truth. Republican officials no longer support democracy. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. So grab a libation, pull up a virtual chair, and join our freewheeling conversations with political mavericks, musical agitators, and kick-ass grassroots groups. The Lowdown Happy Hour will connect you to good trouble activists who are building people power across America. Get the lowdown at hightowerlowdown.org.
Can a high school punish a student for criticizing the school on Snapchat? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. At a high school in Pennsylvania, a ninth grader, identified in the recent Supreme Court decision as BL, didn't make the varsity cheerleading squad, and in the words of the court, did not accept that decision with good grace. More specifically, BL posted to her Snapchat friends group an image of herself and a friend giving a middle finger salute with the caption, "F*** school, f*** softball, f*** cheer, f*** everything." The image was brought to the attention of the school authorities who punished her, suspending her from the JV cheerleading squad for a year. The student apologized, but to no avail. The punishment stood until the student sued in federal district court and won at the Court of Appeals, and at the end of June won her freedom of speech case at the Supreme Court as well. The High Court ruled that the school's interest in teaching good manners did not overcome the student's interest in free expression, emphasizing that the speech caused minimal disruption to teaching, learning, and school activities, and that the school has an important interest in protecting a student's unpopular expression, especially when the expression takes place off campus. The 8-1 majority opinion, written by Justice Breyer, intentionally does not answer all the questions of when off-campus speech might not be protected, but made clear that in this instance, it clearly was a good and clear victory for freedom of speech. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day known as the East St. Louis Race Riot. It is considered the worst case of labor-related violence of the 20th century and one of the worst race riots in American history. At the time, East St. Louis, Illinois, was an industrial hub along the Mississippi River across from St. Louis, Missouri. Production demands for World War I intensified the Great Migration. As African Americans emigrated from the South, filling the demand for industrial labor, tensions grew at workplaces and in the communities in which they settled. That spring, black and white workers had been hired to scab on a local strike. The violence began on May 28th when trade unionists marched to the mayor's office protesting the black labor they considered unfair competition. It quickly turned into an anti-black riot. The National Guard was called out to quell the violence. And on this day, 2 days of rioting began when a car of white men drove through a black neighborhood and fired at a group of blacks. Racist mobs killed as many as 200 African Americans. 6,000 more were left homeless. Many remarked bitterly that the police and National Guard stood by, indifferent to the race violence around them. The president of the Illinois Federation of Labor insisted that employers were to blame for using Southern blacks to break the back of labor. Socialist Party leader Eugene V. Debs declared that the riots were, quote, a foul blot upon the labor movement. Debs continued, had the labor movement freely opened their doors to the Negro instead of barring him, the atrocious crime of East St. Louis would have never blackened the pages of American history. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, as my snoozing sous chef is snoozing quite loudly because that is his job. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. On the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the upper 90s, could go a bit above 100, but we'll see. We get a little bit warmer here at the mothership. Winds will continue out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour with sunny conditions throughout the day. Clear skies tonight with lows in the mid-60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sunny skies tomorrow with highs over 100 because we remain in an active heat advisory. And winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And it looks like on July 4th, we'll have just temperatures only around 98. So we're not going to be firing off any fireworks, and people around here better not. No, they better not. Grass pollen is very high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region, in spite of the fires, is good at 38 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.96 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 75%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 74 and sunny. Oh, I'm sorry. Partly cloudy. London is 74 and partly cloudy. Rome. We're going to skip Paris. No, we can't skip Paris. Let's get to Paris. Paris is 80 degrees and sunny. Rome is 87 and fair. Kyiv is 84 and fair. Kabul is 82 and fair. Hong Kong is 83 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 54 and clear. San Francisco, California is 56 and cloudy. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Pamuk of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United States added Turkey to a list of countries that are implicated in the use of child soldiers over the past year, placing a NATO ally for the first time in such a list, in a move that is likely to further complicate the already fraught ties between Ankara and Washington. The U.S. State Department determined in its 2021 Trafficking in Persons, known as TIP, that Turkey was providing tangible support to the Sultan Murad division in Syria, a faction of Syrian opposition that Ankara has long supported, and a group that Washington said recruited and used child soldiers. There was no immediate reaction from Turkey on the move. In a briefing call with reporters, a senior State Department official also made reference to the use of child soldiers in Libya, saying Washington was hoping to work with Ankara on the issue to address it. With respect to Turkey in particular, this is the first time a NATO member has been listed in the Child Soldier Prevention Act list, the official said. As a respected regional leader and member of NATO, Turkey has the opportunity to address this issue, the recruitment and use of child soldiers in Syria and Libya, she said. Turkey has carried out 3 cross-border operations in Syria against the so-called Islamic State, as well as U.S.-backed Kurdish militia, and has frequently used factions of armed Syrian fighters on top of its own forces. Some of these groups have been accused by human rights groups and the UN of indiscriminately attacking civilians, carrying out kidnappings and lootings. The United Nations had asked Ankara to rein in the Syrian rebels, while Turkey rejected the allegations, calling them baseless. Turkey, through proxies and its own armed forces, has also been involved in the Libyan conflict. Ankara's support has helped the Tripoli-based government reverse a 14-month assault from eastern forces backed by Egypt and Russia.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Sola Olatabo of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged Myanmar's military to release Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi and President Myint now, a UN spokesman said a day after thousands of other detainees were freed. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the army took power on the 1st of February and ousted Suu Kyi's elected government. We reiterate our call for the immediate release of all those who are arbitrarily detained, and that includes President Myint and State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi, said Eric Haneko, associate spokesperson for Guterres. Myanmar freed more than 2,000 detainees on Wednesday, among them journalists and others who the ruling party said had been on incitement charges for taking part in protests. Many of the military's opponents have been held, some convicted, under a law that criminalizes comments that could cause fear or spread false news. Suu Kyi is on trial for a similar offense, among others, and remains in detention. We remain deeply concerned at the continuation of violence and intimidation, including arbitrary arrests by the security forces, said Kaneko. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we're going to meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Monday, right after July 4th, because it'll be the 5th. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all this holiday weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.